Welcome everybody. I'm Skyler Pilgram, a member here at Emmanuel Christian Church, and today I'm joined by Brian Fisher. He's an elder here at Emmanuel, and today we're going to have a conversation about carrying your cross, which I think is a fitting subject, being Easter weekend. And we're going to talk about what does it look like to live out the faith of Christianity, and Brian's going to explain that and give us some practical examples that he's lived out in his life. So,
well, thank you, Skyler.
How are you, Brian?
I'm good. Thank you.
That's
Glad to be here.
So, let's start at the beginning, like growing up in the home. One story I know is on Sunday mornings when, like, if family was visiting, your dad would be like, "Well, I don't know about you guys, but we go to church." So what?
Yeah, that was definitely my dad. We definitely went to church. In fact, I know I was probably in church as the first Sunday I was able to after being born. I think there's still a picture of my mom and dad having me all dressed up in my Sunday best going to church the first time, and went basically every Sunday from then. There were very few Sundays that we would have missed as a family, unless somebody was sick or something like that. But for the most part, if church was going on, we were going to be there. And that's, back in the days when you had Sunday night church and Sunday morning church, Sunday school, all that was going on. And there's always other events going on too, mother and daughter banquets and things like that, that we were involved in all of it. And it was definitely number one priority in my parents' life that we would be part of the church and be in the church family as much as possible whenever we could. So it was definitely part of my upbringing.
What do you think that like imposed on your life today, like even after you graduated high school and like moved out of the house? What do you think that kind of imparted on your life, like a habit or like a discipline sort of
I would say a discipline. Yeah, that's a good word. I hadn't actually thought of the word discipline, but in a way it was a habit maybe, but really it was much more of a discipline. You had a choice at some point in time where I could choose, am I going to go to church or am I not going to go to church? And I think the discipline instilled definitely was part of that. And you get to a certain point in your life where you miss that if you're not there. You miss the relationships that you've developed. In my case, growing up with a lot of cousins were part of my inner circle, and they were all part of the church. So growing up together, we had that relationship already pre-built. So it was definitely a very key part of that whole becoming a Christian and becoming part of the church.
Yeah, I think a lot of us right now are probably missing that community that I definitely have. Like, just being part of the elders meeting last weekend, like that was pretty important to me, just being able to be with other guys and have a conversation. So like at what age did you kind of begin to grasp like the sacrifice that it was going to take to like lay down like selfish ambition and take up your cross?
I'm going to say probably around junior high. I think before then it was all still, you're your kid, you're learning and growing. But I think when I reached junior high, I realized there's something bigger than me that's involved in all this. And you begin to realize, step out of your shadow of your parents and you begin to step into your own personhood. And you begin to learn how to interact with other people who are not necessarily part of your family, whether it's through camp or whatever it was I might have been in. You begin to have those relationships that are different than family, and I think that's when it began to make an impact on me. And you begin to look for opportunities to spread your wings a little bit, I guess.
Yeah.
And you can do that any number of ways. You can do it through good or you can do it through bad, and there's lots of opportunities of both. And just having that undergirding of discipline and Christian background kind of led me into that direction.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned camp. Was there a camp that you went to like before Deep Valley
just
growing
Deep
up?
Valley. No, it was just Deep Valley.
Oh,
that was a big one. So kind of a sort of a camp thing would have been Vacation Bible School. Back in those days we would do 2 weeks of Vacation Bible School, and it was much more intensive than we do kind of a week-long thing here now, which is really very good program.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just different. Times change and we do things differently now. But camp was a big part of my life. Yeah.
So like after you got baptized, what did your involvement in service look like after baptism, like up through high school and college and stuff?
Yeah, that was at some point in time there. I was still in high school. I began to teach, and I'm trying to remember when that might have started. I
Teach
know
like Sunday school?
I was teaching a Sunday school class. It was younger kids, like fourth graders maybe, and I might have been a junior or senior in high school, and they needed a teacher, so I kind of said I can do that, and I volunteered to do that. We didn't have a Sunday school room, so we put up a curtain next to the men's room, and I had a little table there, and we had Sunday school class with those kids. So that was kind of where it started, and then from there I developed at least a little bit of a passion for teaching. I kind of enjoyed that. I learned that if you want to learn about anything, teach it.
Right.
That's where you're going to learn about it.
Yeah.
Being a student is one thing, but teaching it requires a whole other level of dedication and understanding. So, and I've always kind of been intrigued by study and learning and things like that. So becoming a teacher really kind of drove that. And to the point where even after high school, we didn't have a college age class. So we started our own, and we did our own teaching, and we did develop that ourselves. So that was all part of that. And then getting into camp, becoming a counselor, teaching little kids and junior high and senior high kids, all became part of that growth process for me in that area of service, and in particular teaching.
Yeah, I think the teaching thing's a big thing. It's one of the martial arts. I think to get to the highest level, you have to teach the ones under you in order to get that next rank, which I think is kind of interesting how you kind of like tied that. If you want to get better, then you should teach, which is kind of like interesting, because you're not, you might be farther ahead than them, but to get farther ahead, you can kind of learn some things from bringing those up behind you.
Yeah, when they ask the hard question that you don't know the answer to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So that was kind of like what service looked like as an individual, but like once you got married and had kids and stuff and working full time, what did that balance look like between like spending time with them and meeting their needs and then also meeting the needs of the church and stuff?
Well, one of the big things with that was the fact that Patty, my wife, was a key part of that. I mean, she had to be there to support and to help and to be that grounding force for me, because without her, it just couldn't have been done. So, having somebody like that by your side really is key in my life anyway. And I've always had the priorities, I think, in my life fairly straight most of my life. I've been blessed that way. I always put God first, church first. And maybe to the detriment even of some cases where I hate to say overdid it, but I don't want to say I did. But your kids, I think, recognize that. They see that, and they know that when you put Christ first, that's important. And then how that interaction is with your job. How do you do your job with the church? How do you do your family with your church? Making all that come together is a huge balancing act. It's really tough to do. It's a struggle every time. I mean, there's always going to be something that comes up that wants to pull you away.
Oh yeah.
So whether it's work or family, they're going to try to pull you away from that, and you've got to be ready for that, and you've got to be ready to stand firm when it comes time. When that thing comes up that says, "Gee, I'm going to go do this other thing," whether it's sports or work or whatever it might be. It's like, no, I need to do this. I need to be with the church. I need to be with the family, and make that a priority. And hopefully your kids see that as part of your growth.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any leadership around you to kind of keep you between the guide rails, like
accountability?
Yeah.
Maybe accountability. Yeah. There was. What was nice is that growing up, I did have lots of friends who were definitely part of the church and tied to the church. So having that group accountability is important, I think. You have to have those guys that you can go to in the middle of the night and call and say, "Hey, what's going on? I need help here," whatever. And just knowing you have that person by your side is really important. So
yeah,
I encourage any men, young men especially, get that other person beside you that can take the walk with you. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, especially with like the service projects and stuff, because it's like, hey man, it's been like 4 or 6 months since you like last helped with a project or whatever.
Well, and it's also cool that you can get together, you can do big projects, whether
Right.
it's, in my case, working at camp, clearing brush or whatever. It's a lot easier to do when you're younger and you have the time to do that, and not so many frustrations with family and work that maybe you can take advantage of some of those things. So yeah, I agree. That's having that camaraderie, the brothers in arms kind of thing is important.
Yeah, for sure. What are some like characteristics or traits that you had to show to bring out or help your children along with their call from God? Because each one's going to be different.
Oh yeah, they're all different.
So.
We have 4 children. Danielle, Ben, John, and Corey. They obviously grew up in the church.
Which one's the oldest?
Danielle would be
Danielle
the oldest.
was the oldest.
Then we had 3 boys after Danielle. So Danielle became the second mother in the household. A lot of times she thought she was the first mother in some cases, but no. I think the fact that they saw my wife and I so actively involved in the church, being part of it, encouraging them to step up on their own. Whenever they had opportunities to lead and to do things, they took advantage of it.
Mm-hmm.
And not being discouraging to them. I think there's a lot of times we discourage our children in many ways, and I think we should try not to do that. When they want to try something, let them try it. Let them fail. I think that's a key thing. I failed a lot in my life.
Oh yeah.
And I think you learn a lot from failure. And I think that was part of what we intentionally did, is let them step up and try things on their own. And even in the church, same thing. Doing that in the church too. So let them try what they want to, but keep it in perspective. A lot of times we'll get. I think our children will let them run the house, and that can't happen. Be the parents,
right?
Let them be the children, and let them be children. They're not little adults; they're children, and make that part of their life experience.
Yeah, I know. Like when I went to camp, not only were you there, but depending on what week of camp it was, I think at least Danielle and Ben were there. Because when I went, Corey and John might have been young enough that they were still like in the camp and not old enough to be like in that counselor thing. But that was kind of cool seeing, like, not only were you there, directing some of the stuff, but then they were there.
Oh yeah, I made them all do jobs. Yeah, they were all recreation directors or whatever. But yeah, they had responsibilities and they knew what to do. So it was good for them.
Cool. So what does biblical headship mean to you, and then how does that relate or tie into like the eldership role?
Well, you look at the chief elder, the head elder is Jesus, and you look at how he sacrificed for the church. I mean, he gave up his life for the church. So when you're looking at headship, you're looking at servant leadership, really, more than anything. Is how do you serve in such a way that you lead by serving? And it's easy to lead by dictate and by forcing people to do things. It's really difficult to lead by encouragement and by having sympathy and empathy, those kind of things. Now, I'll be the first to admit I'm not a very empathetic person. I can be sympathetic, but I don't do empathy well. So that's been one of my struggles, is trying to empathize with people and the struggles that they might have in their life, and lead in that way. But also just being an encourager, I think, is a big part of that. And the way that Jesus encouraged the disciples and encourages us even today to carry on, to be the light, to be the salt, all those kinds of things, and encouraging people to do that. I think that's really where the headship and the leadership comes from, is to be more like Jesus every day that you can.
Yeah.
That's your goal anyway.
Yeah. I think the empathy thing, isn't that in the other X gene? And then the encouragement's more in the Y?
It can be, yeah.
I mean, not every case, but...
No, of course, but yeah.
I think
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, I think, well, the role of deacon, I mean, it's, the Latin is servant leader, right? So being able to, you're leading them, but being able to come alongside them and kind of encourage them through it and give them vision too helps.
Yeah, deacon's kind of a special position in that they're more of the hands-on ministry, really being there with people and being alongside people and working with them and providing the support systems that they need. So yeah, that's definitely the deacon, like you said, being a servant, being actually one who waits on tables. Is kind of the word for deacon.
Yeah.
So understanding that role is an important thing. It's a vital role in the church. Yep.
Yeah. So after being called to be an elder, was there any mentorship? I mean, I'm sure there was, but like, what did that look like?
Not so much no formal mentorship really, but just being part of a group of men that I respected. And seeing their faithfulness. I mean, I can obviously mention names like Lawrence King and Gene Mecklem and Sam Slater and of course my dad, who was an elder also.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, seeing those guys and how they sacrificed and how they gave of themselves to the point where that was a major part of their lives, and wanting to reflect that, and also in some ways not to let their faithfulness fall to the side because of not being able to match up or to follow up. So I think that's an important part of it too. Is they led by example, and they were in my mind great men's shoulders to stand on, and I look forward to hopefully being just a little bit of what they've done in my life. It shows up also. So yeah, those are the kind of mentorships you do. Mentoring is more, I think, examples, walking alongside, pointing out things that can be done, and that was a big part of it.
So like how long was it like between when you felt the calling to become an elder to actually like stepping into the role and coming in front of the church and being introduced, like, you know what I mean?
Being able to stand up in front of the church, and you mean, or
no?
Okay.
So you felt the calling to become an elder.
Mm-hmm.
So how long did that mentorship or that following last until like they brought you up there and said, "All right, hey, we're bringing Brian on as an elder"?
It was years.
Years.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I might have had the title elder, where I may not have even been actually serving as truly an elder, I think. But the process of it's not something you just do day one. You don't become an elder today.
Yeah.
It's something that takes time, and it takes experience, and sometimes some very very troubling and hard experience. But I would, to put a time on it, just years.
Years.
And I'm still growing. I'm still learning how to do it. Every day there's something new to consider and to work through. So it's not something you turn on and off. It's very hard.
No, I don't think that's something that you can just all of a sudden like push somebody in the deep end and be like, all right, here you go.
Okay, yeah, you'll fail if you do that. I guarantee. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that being said, like what kind of legacy do you want to leave on the men up and coming? Like what do you vision for them, I guess?
Boy, I guess I am at that age where I need to start thinking about that, huh? I just hope that if I can just be a stepping stone for that next generation, someone that can be there to encourage, to lift up, someone that the next group can come to and say, hey, we have this situation, we've never dealt with it before. Maybe you've dealt with it, and provide that assistance and that guidance. I think that would be an important part of what I would see my legacy. If I can do that, if I can be that support system, maybe is a good word to use. I think that would be great. Like I can see that example from men previous to me, and I'd like to continue to see that post Brian, I guess.
So like a strong community of not only the current eldership, but like the men like coming up into there,
yeah.
making sure they're bonded, and then bonded with you guys, and with even the generation like prior to that, like
exactly,
like my brother and Don's son,
the next
Nathan,
generation
and,
down, exactly, yeah. It's a multi-generational thing, and if any one generation decides they're not going to do it, it ends. It's a chain. Once you break one link, it's gone. So it's really hard to rebuild it after that.
I remember one time we were, I think it might have been an elders meeting, and I brought up something about camp. I was like, well, what's our plan for camp this summer, and or for like in the future and stuff? And they're like, well, camp is whatever you want to make it. And I think this was a couple years ago, and like I might have just moved back from school, so for that responsibility to kind of like to see it start to trade hands, it was like, whoa, really? like seriously?
You start to see it.
Yeah.
Been there.
So that was kind of an interesting thing, and I think it's important too, because to like utilize, you know, our like who we have in our circle, to kind of get a vision for like where we want to go.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, you want to bond together with your friends and your coworkers. And,
yep. Because that's a mission that I don't think any of us could do alone.
No, you're not gonna do it by yourself. No, you're right.
And we're not supposed to.
No, you're right. Good point.
So, all right, let's get into like some fun facts.
Oh gee. Okay.
Who's a inspiring character from the Bible for you?
There's obviously many. David's always high up there, and Peter's always high up there. But really, from a practical standpoint, Nehemiah is a guy that I've always looked up to. He's more recently in my life, well, let's put during my last 20, 30 years, I think I've looked at Nehemiah as being a real hero, because of the situation he had having to come back from Babylon and rebuild Jerusalem and rebuild the wall and all the struggles that he went through. I became a project manager many years ago, and Nehemiah to me is the biblical project manager. He had to overcome all these problems, and he had to have a wall built within a certain amount of time, and how you do that and how you keep everybody that's holding you back from preventing that from happening, and the plans he put into place to overcome those obstacles. So on a very practical level, Nehemiah is probably one of my heroes that I've looked up to in my adult life anyway. And there's always other people that I've enjoyed reading about. Esther was always one of my favorite books of the Bible. I still love teaching Esther. Every chance I get, I like to teach Esther at camp, because I think it's a great lesson for young adults and young children to learn about somebody like Esther. So
yeah, because do we have an idea of like how old Esther was in that?
General thought whenever she went into the harem was she might have been 13 to 14 years old.
Wow.
So teaching that to children, junior high kids is kind of impressive to them. So
yeah, that's impressive, because I think stories like that can kind of really jumpstart people that age into thinking they're more capable.
Yeah, exactly.
They're more capable than they think they are.
Yep, that's exactly right. Somebody to look up to.
What's a most influential book that you've read other than the Bible?
Probably Don't Check Your Brains at the Door. It's a religious book written by Josh McDowell. It's based on Evidence Demands a Verdict that Josh McDowell wrote. And Evidence Demands a Verdict is a thick volume of all the evidences for Jesus and what he is and who he is and all that goes into it. And Don't Check Your Brains at the Door was a high school version that I read shortly after college. And I actually put together a series of lessons for it when I was teaching high school kids. And it brought it into a much more relatable way of understanding the evidences for Jesus. So we were planning to continue to teach that. And then from a non-biblical perspective, completely non-biblical, my sister encouraged me to read Pillars of the Earth. Big, thick book also.
Wow.
But it's a great book about a guy that was a stonemason, and he wanted to build a great cathedral. And it just talks about his life and how he did that. So that was probably one of the best books I've ever read.
That's cool. Stonemasonry would be I'm a machinist, but like that's like the old school, like.
Yeah, you'd like it.
Yeah.
Pillars of the Earth. I recommend it.
Cool. Most interesting place that you've traveled to? I know you've traveled to a lot of places.
Man, that's. I've been blessed to be able to travel a lot. That's been for work, so you don't always get a chance to do all the sightseeing that you might want to do. But I've enjoyed visiting Vietnam. I think that's probably one of the most intriguing places I've visited. I've really enjoyed it there. The people were great. Being able to see the Last Supper painting in Milan. I got to actually go in and see the painting on the wall. Cool. That was definitely a bucket list thing. I really made a big impression on me. I like that a lot. And there's other places, obviously. You can talk about going to visit the hometown where my ancestors came from in England. My mother had found out where they came from, so I went and visited that town to see where they came from. So that was fun to see. I've had opportunities to do that stuff, so I'm really actually very blessed. So
yeah, that's really cool. Real quick, favorite Bible verse?
Be 1 Corinthians 1:25. The wisdom of God, the foolishness of God is greater than man's wisdom, and the weakness of God is greater than man's strength.
Wow.
That's been my favorite verse for years, and just keeps me in my place. When I think I'm smarter or stronger, realizing that it's all foolishness to God and weakness to God.
Yeah, that really puts things in perspective.
So that's my favorite verse.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming out here and having this conversation with me.
Good. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Very nice job.
All right. That concludes this interview.